Welcome to week 2 of youth ministry in the local church this summer. I hope that you're staying up to speed, and I hope that week 1 kind of gave you a good outlook of what to expect each week for this course. And I hope that you're enjoying a little bit of your summer break without some of the classes and things like that as well. Well, we're going to dive right into this week's lecture, and we're going to cover chapters 3 and 4 of Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry by Doug Fields. And so chapter 3 is why a purpose statement is important and how to create one. Have you ever, I want you to think in your life, have you ever kind of signed up maybe at a church or possibly at a community thing where you signed up maybe to work somewhere or to serve somewhere, possibly in a ministry in a church where you were just like, hey, there's a need, I want to help fulfill that need, and you show up and no expectations were given at all, and you had no idea what you were doing. It kind of leads to frustration. When you don't really know why you're doing something, it typically makes the how and the what a little bit more blurry, a little bit more gray, kind of not understanding all of that. And so purpose is drastically important. Well, it's the same way in ministry. So if you think in your student ministry, you're running youth group every week, you're running whatever program you have on Sunday every week, you're running youth events throughout the year, you're taking kids on trips, you're taking kids on mission trips into camp, and you're meeting with students, hanging out, and taking them out to eat and just kind of getting to know them. You're having them over at your house, and there's all these different things, but none of that will ever make sense, and it'll always lead to frustration if you don't know why you're doing it, if you don't understand why you're doing it. So in this lecture, I want to talk about why a purpose statement is important, and then we'll look at how to create one. So let's dive right in. Letter A, what a purpose statement will do for your youth ministry. So I want to kind of convince you if you need convincing on why it's important. So number 1, a purpose statement will clarify your ministry's existence. It will clarify your ministry's existence. Now, when you think purpose statement, you might have heard it called in church world a mission statement or something like that. It kind of works interchangeably. I'm going to use the word purpose here just to kind of give us purpose and a reason for why we do what we do, but mission is the same thing. So here's the truth. It'll clarify your ministry's existence. Here's the big idea. The why must be clarified before the how will make sense to others. So when you're leading people and you're leading students and you're leading families, here's the truth. They have to understand, if you can get them to understand the why, all the how will make perfect sense. But possibly the reason the how's not making sense to any of them, and it's just leading you to frustration working with them, it's because maybe you haven't clarified the why of why you're doing it. So it'll clarify your ministry's existence. Number 2, it will attract followers. You know, if you look at some of the most trendy churches out there, one of the things that all of them have is they have a clear purpose. Whatever you want to think about Andy Stanley and North Point Community Church up around Atlanta, you might have your opinions about them, but here's the truth, is they know why they're doing what they're doing. They know the audience they're trying to reach, and so everything that they do is really, it's with purpose. Their purpose is to create a church where unchurched people love to attend. And here's the truth, is they're accomplishing that. They don't make apologies for it. And so my point is this, is like for you need to have purpose behind why you do it. It'll attract followers. You know, if you look in our city of Jacksonville, you can see some of these churches, these church plants that are just booming right now. It's because they know why they're doing what they're doing. Number 3, a purpose statement, it'll minimize conflict. It'll minimize conflict. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, it helps you lead people better. It helps you plan events and stay on mission. And it also helps people follow you. And it'll minimize the conflict that you have with other people because you know why you're doing what you're doing. Number 4, purpose statement. It'll create excitement. It'll create personal excitement. Isn't there something exciting when you can get behind something that They know why they're doing it. It just brings excitement. It brings energy. And so a purpose statement's a good thing for your ministry. Number 5, it will professionalize your ministry. It'll professionalize your ministry. Here's the truth. Many of you guys are going to graduate in a year, 2, 3, whatever, and you're going to go into your first position, possibly as a young person. So you're going to be 21, 22 years old, something like that. That's when I started. And I'll be honest with you, I had to deal with a lot of people viewing me as a child, and I went to my home church when I graduated college. So a lot of those people still saw me as an elementary age kid, as a teenager, trying to just have fun with students and things like that. And so when I developed a purpose statement that brought purpose behind everything that I was going to do and implement into our student ministry, it kind of made it sound a little bit more professional. It seemed like it aged me. It aged my experience a little bit more. So if you want to professionalize your ministry, create a purpose statement and stick with it. The fastest way to show a church that things are happening is to really just carefully launch a purpose statement. So you say, okay, purpose statement's important. We get that. How to create it. First, you need to check out the direction of your church. It's not a healthy thing if your purpose is much different than the church's. It needs to be the same, okay? Now, it can be strategic to students, but it needs to kind of have that same idea, the same flavor, the same mission behind it. So don't try to create two separate things, because that's never going to end well, and it's always going to create an unhealthy tension, kind of two churches in one kind of thing. So check out the direction of your church, what their statement is. If they don't have one, talk to your senior pastor. We need to create one so that we know why we're doing. So when we're evaluating at the year-end mark, we can tell, hey, did we accomplish what we tried to accomplish or not? If you don't have a purpose, you don't know how to evaluate. You don't know how to measure things. Number 2, teach the youth ministry leadership the 5 purposes. Now, in week 1, we looked at the 5 purposes of youth ministry, and we looked at those deep. They need to be a regular thing for your leaders. Okay, so your leadership, they need to hear that on a regular basis. So hey, we're doing this event. Why? That needs to be a constant thing that you're explaining why you're doing what you're doing with events, with programs, and with everything, how you spend your time and all that. Number 3, encourage the youth ministry leadership to put their thoughts in writing. So get them to write down why you're doing things. It'll help them think through purpose, because a lot of your position is to train them and to get them to think on mission and get them to think on purpose. Number 4, gather your team's written examples and then start crafting a sentence that will be appealing and compelling for people to follow. So letter C, what to do once the purpose statement is written. Number 1, you need to seek the wisdom of others. Seek the wisdom of others. The Bible talks a lot about wisdom, and it says in the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom. In the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom. Here's the truth, is for you, that's true in ministry. Don't do ministry in isolation. Get the feedback of others. You should want that feedback. If they say that doesn't make sense, it's not clear, it's not concise, it's not compelling, there's all these different things. You need to get the wisdom. Ask some pastors in the community. Ask some mentors that you have in your life. Possibly call some people who have trained you in ministry and say, hey, how does this sound? Does this make sense? Ask a key elder in your church or deacon or something. Get your pastor's approval. That's the second point. Get support from your pastor. He needs to be behind it. If you really want your ministry to succeed and to go far, the pastor has to be behind it. Don't try to do a purpose statement where he has not signed off on it. He doesn't know it. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't agree with it. None of that. And so make sure you get his support. Number 3, launch it with wisdom. Launch it with wisdom. Take some time, think through how you're going to launch it. Don't just get up one day and say, here it is, without gaining some wisdom from other people. Have a strategic idea for how you want to launch your statement. Number 4, give people an opportunity to process their future participation. Don't just get up one Sunday and say, here's my purpose, get behind it now or whatever. Give them some time to process, hey, do I want to be a part of this? When I recruit leaders, I usually tell them the purpose statement, and I say, I believe that if you're signing up, you can help us accomplish that mission. You can help us accomplish our purpose better. And if you say, hey, I don't really want to do that, that's fine. I'd rather them say no to accomplishing it than sign up without the intent of trying to accomplish that purpose. And so it's important that you give them time to process, give them time to pray through that. Number 5, put leadership behind your purpose. Here's the truth about leadership is you have to understand that building a purpose-driven youth ministry will take a tremendous amount of commitment, perseverance, and leadership. Many times that you really can't see fruit with a purpose statement in the first few weeks and first few months. It takes time to develop that, possibly years before the church is completely behind that. You know, I think about Chick-fil-A and their marketing, and if you go to Chick-fil-A, everybody knows that when you say thank you, they say, my pleasure. That's what all Chick-fil-A say. And when Truett Cathy, when he started that, I was listening to one of Chick-fil-A's marketing strategists on a podcast, and he said he was in this meeting when Truett Cathy told the leadership of Chick-fil-A that that's what we're going to start doing is saying my pleasure when people say thank you. And so it took about 5 years for that to stick at the Chick-fil-A's all across the United States. And so it's something that takes time. So you don't get frustrated or discouraged if you say, hey, here's my purpose statement, and 3 weeks later people don't know it, they're not behind it, they don't follow it, and they don't really understand it. It takes time for you to see that happen. So let's talk. I want to mention a few tips before we kind of move on with how to create it and for writing one. So here's some tips for crafting a purpose statement. Number 1, purpose statements should be simple. My idea is, and I know Twitter has expanded the amount of characters, but I kind of say it needs to be in 140 characters or less, all right? So don't just make this long paragraph, this book that nobody's going to be able to read. It needs to be simple, something that you could say, something that's easily remembered, and things like that. Number 2, purpose statements should be meaningful. Purpose statements should be meaningful. They should have purpose behind them. Number 3, purpose statements should be action-oriented. It says what you're trying to do in the community, what your goal is for the city. That's what the purpose is. Number 4, they should be compelling. They should be compelling. When you say it, it should kind of grab people's attention like, I want to be a part of that. I want to join that. Because it's that compelling, it's that appealing to the audience that's there. So let's move on to the next one, conveying our purpose and leading by example. Conveying our purpose and leading by example. This is lecture 4, chapter 4 of our notes. So how a leader conveys its purpose. Number 1, a leader communicates the purposes. You have to communicate the purpose all the time. So I mentioned it can be frustrating when people don't grab hold of it right away. That's okay. And but here's what you are responsible for. Communicating it on a regular basis. Making it a regular thing that you say. So to students, the first thing, use your 5 key words, the purposes of why you do what you do. Use them often. Students need to understand. They need to start hearing those 5 purposes on a regular basis. And teach through your purpose statement every year to students. So if you have this one sentence you've crafted, make sure students are starting to understand that sentence. So teach through it. Teach through why you do that from the Bible, why you believe your purpose statement. You need to communicate it, secondly, to leaders. Have them memorize it. I know that sounds crazy, but leaders should be able to say your purpose statement. Have you ever been to a conference or something like that where everyone kind of uses the same language? I can think of conferences I've been to at North Point and Atlanta. I've been to Elevation and different places like that. And I'm always amazed that no matter who it is on the team, from the senior leader down to the other pastoral team or just their directors of certain ministries, it's amazing to me. I always come back and I'm like, man, everyone used the same language. Everyone used the same phrases and things like that. The reason? It's because they're communicated often. Have your leaders memorize it. Repeat the statement at every leader meeting. Every time you have a leader meeting, repeat it. When you see success, like a student who accepted Jesus in your youth ministry, and I would send that to your team through a text or through an email and say, hey guys, thank you for investing in students. We had one get saved this week. Thanks for helping us accomplish our purpose and our mission in the community. And so, I'll honestly, just put it in front of them all the time. You need to communicate it to letter C to parents. Explain and quote your purpose statement at parent meetings. So when you have parent meetings, make sure that they're hearing it, that they understand why you're doing what you're doing. Include your purpose in correspondence to parents. So if you're emailing them, if you're texting them sometimes, if you're sending letters through the mail, whatever you do, postcards, whatever, make sure that you're communicating that on a regular basis in your correspondence. Parents should be able to know your purpose statement. And then to the church. To the whole church. Don't just make your purpose statement isolated to just the people who attend your student ministry or a part of that. Make sure your church understands it. Ask the church to pray each year for you to fulfill your purpose and put it in the worship guide. So if your church has a bulletin or a worship guide they pass out on the weekends and they have something about student ministry, include it in there. It'll help them understand the reason for why you exist. Number 2, not only does a leader communicate its purpose, a leader repeats the purpose. A leader repeats it often. No one will know the purpose or value as the point person of the ministry. No one will really know it better. No one should know it better. No one will care more than you. And that's okay. You should care. So it should be something you repeat often, just in normal conversation, in meetings and individual meetings that you have up from the platform on Wednesday. It should be something you're saying all the time. Number 3, a leader makes sure key people memorize that statement. So make sure you're having your key leaders say it, recite it, and memorize it on a regular basis. So what to do after your purpose statement is known? So people know it. How do you kind of evaluate? Where do you go from there? The first thing is monitor the purpose statement. Monitor that statement. Evaluate it and measure how well you are accomplishing it. Okay? So don't just say it one time and never evaluate. In 6 months, say, hey, how are we getting it? Are we accomplishing it? Did that event accomplish the purpose that we wanted it to accomplish? And if you have to say no, listen, don't invest money, don't invest energy and time into things that are not accomplishing your purpose. So monitor it, evaluate it. Number 2, manage your time by the purposes. So we mentioned a purpose statement. We mentioned the 5 purposes in week 1. Here's the truth. Evaluate and manage your time and see if you're accomplishing it. So after 6 months, evaluate, hey, how am I spending my time? Or weekly, how am I spending my time? Am I accomplishing what I'm supposed to accomplish? Because a lot of times we're going to find, I bet if you were to evaluate, you're probably spending a good chunk of your time not accomplishing your purpose and mission. So focus your time and energy so you are putting the most energy into your purpose. Number 3, model the purposes in your life. So if you want to work on if you want your students to evangelize, you evangelize. If you want your students to experience community and fellowship, you be in community and fellowship. If you want them to know what it is to worship and worship on a regular basis, you worship, you lead that, you model that for them. Listen, I cannot talk about the importance of servanthood if I'm not the one stacking chairs or picking up papers at the end of a program. So listen, if you want your students to learn ministry, they need to see you doing that. Number 4, create programs that fulfill your purposes. Programs are a means to an end, but they're not the end of themselves. Okay, so don't think, wow, I did it. I created the program. No, 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 no. A program helps you accomplish the purpose. And that's reaching people and discipling people. And so for you, don't just think the program's the end. Wow, we did it. We accomplished our Wednesday night. That's what we wanted. No, did Wednesday night help you reach your purpose? Did it help you reach students? Did it help you disciple students? That's how you need to evaluate. Don't just say, wow, we did it by creating a program. That's not the end. The end is your purpose. A program is just a means to get you to your purpose. So, letter C, measuring how you're fulfilling your purpose. Here's a quick thoughts, and I'll run through these quickly. Every successful church or organization does not become successful without evaluating itself. Evaluation is a good thing, and you should do it. Set some time on your calendar. Evaluate your student ministry on a regular basis. Evaluation, letter B, is critical to be successful. You must evaluate everything. Every program, every visit, every Wednesday night, every Sunday. You need to evaluate how well you're doing to make sure you're accomplishing your purpose. What you desire to replicate, you should evaluate. So if you want to replicate things, say, man, that person became a Christian. That's something we obviously want to replicate. What did we do to create that? How did we get that student in the door? How did we minister to them? How did we reach them? How did we open up a conversation for them? What environment did we create when they got there? My point is this: what you desire to replicate, you have to evaluate. So make sure that your purpose, that's what you want to replicate, you're evaluating on a regular basis. There's 3 major metrics that I think will help you evaluate clearly. They're things we evaluate, so this is not from our textbook. This is really from me that I think will help you. But the first one is this: it's worship. And here's what I mean by that. The worship gathering, okay? So for us, we measure that on a regular basis. So for students, it's Wednesday night. For our church, it's Sunday morning. We take attendance. And I know, listen, don't make numbers the main thing. This is number 1 under that. Don't make numbers the main thing, but make them a thing. And I know there's a battle of, it's not all about numbers, and I get that, and it's not all about numbers, but it's something we need to evaluate. For instance, if we had 100 kids in a Wednesday night youth service, and then 6 months later we have 10, then we need to evaluate that. We can't just say, wow, bless God, we got the 10 that God wants here and stuff. There could be behaviors that we're making that has made 100 go down to 10, and that's something we have to evaluate, and it's obviously something that we need to take a look at. Every number, here's a good thing that it's not this is not original to us, something we say on a regular basis at our church though. Every number has a name, every name has a story, and every story matters to God. It's something, so we need to evaluate. We need to know who's here. What we believe is important for people is a metric that we should be measuring. If you think student ministry attendance is important, if you think Sunday attendance is important, we got to evaluate it. We got to measure it. So the first one's worship. The second one is groups, small groups. We'll talk a lot about small groups in this course, but small groups is so important. Small groups really have 2 primary purposes. If I was to kind of summarize those, it's discipleship and relationships. Relationships, discipleship. And here's the truth, is small groups, they're really the best way for you to measure how engaged your students are. It's the best way to measure how engaged they are. And so if you have a student who attends but they're not active in their small group, then they're probably not as engaged as you need them to be. And so small groups are a great way to measure how engaged they are. Worship attendance is important, but listen, one thing corporate worship, it's not designed to do, it's not designed to help people build deep friendships. It's not a time for people to get closer to one another. You might have a time in your service where you encourage people to shake hands and give people high fives, whatever, and go around the room and do whatever. That's like a 15, 20-second kind of moment. It's not intended for them to get to know people deeper. That's what groups are for. In our experience, groups are the stickiest thing that we do as a church. It's the stickiest thing. So people that join a group are much less likely to drop out of church than people who aren't in a group. And so they're the stickiest thing. If you can get them into a group, you likely have them for a long, long time. So groups, you should evaluate it, how well your groups are, how well your small group leaders are doing. Are connections being made? Are students becoming friends with one another? Is small group leaders really investing into them? How's discipleship coming? And things like that. The third thing is outreach. Outreach. We view outreach in two ways in our church and in our community. In our church just means, hey, are we having people serve on the weekends? Are we having people, be a part of volunteer teams? Are we having people do the work of the ministry, like Ephesians says? And that's the main thing that we want people to do. Then in our community, that's just, are they evangelizing? Are they inviting people? Are they reaching people? Are they serving in the community? Is the community better because we exist? If our church didn't exist tomorrow, would the community even know? Would the community even care? Or better yet, would the community even be impacted? And so it's important. We need to serve in our community and in our church. Number two, a good indicator of the spiritual maturity of your students is how often they serve in your church and how often they serve in our community. So you should be growing your volunteer team, taking them through a process, encouraging them to serve. We ask for those who attend our church to engage with our church by participating and assisting us in accomplishing the mission of our church. So we should be calling people. I love what J.D. Greer says in his exposition of Ephesians. He says, as a pastor, I really left the ministry. Now, when you hear that, you're kind of like, whoa, that's weird. If you're a pastor, you kind of went deeper into ministry. And I can buy into that statement, but here's what JD's saying. Is in Ephesians, I believe it's chapter 4, it talks about equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. That is the pastor's job. That's the pastor's role, is to equip people within our church, people within our community, go out and do ministry. And so what he's saying when he says, I became a pastor, I left the ministry, he's saying that when he became a pastor, he really got out of the ministry and he became an equipper to equip everybody he leads to go and do ministry. So for you as a youth leader, as a youth pastor, your role is to get students, get them converted, get them baptized, and then get them to realize that they can go out and serve, that they can serve on the weekends, they can serve on Wednesday nights, they can serve in their community, they can impact their high school, they can impact their middle school, they can be a part of a community and make it better. So listen, let me end by saying what I said at the beginning. If you can't define why you're doing things, the how and the what will never make sense. The how and the what, it'll always lead to frustration. But when you really have why you're doing things clarified and you get that and the people you're leading get it, the success, the ceiling of potential that you have as a ministry just continues to rise and rise, and God can do amazing things when you understand why you're doing them.